Hey guys, welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee. I'm here with my co-host, Clint Aiken, and we are here with Philippe Flichy from Nexterus here in Houston, a Pennsylvania-based company, but he is the president of the Houston region. And as always, we're recording live in the Shell studio here in beautiful Deer Park, Texas. So Philippe, we're glad to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now, guys, the topic today is centered around supply chain. We all know it's trickling down. It's having a massive impact, really from the top of the food chain all the way back down to the bottom of the food chain when we see it in our grocery stores and our local shopping experiences, right? It's a big impact on inflation right now, and all of that having to do with what we're seeing in supply chain. So real quick, Philippe, for our audience, maybe you can give us a quick background of what you guys do specifically so they understand why we have you out today as a relevant expert.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. So we are a supply chain optimization company. So we do the optimization of the supply chain up to finding you the right transportation systems to move your goods around, what is so-called 3PL.
Fantastic. So, so when you think about, we've had some folks on from supply chain before, it's really a very unique and multifaceted operation. There's just so many moving pieces to it. It's not just a trucking company. It's not just a port, but it's all of these things working in concert. And it sounds like you're operating as kind of a liaison between these things to make them more efficient, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So,
I think sometimes too we're realizing how spoiled we were pre-COVID because we ordered something, it was just there. We go to the grocery store, it's just there, and now that's not happening as much.
Yeah,
so
I'll go
you're helping with that,
yeah.
yeah.
And trying to understand what's happening and what could be the future, because it's,
right. So let's talk about the current state of supply chain. What are we seeing, and tell us a little bit about what's taking place.
Well, what we're seeing today is not pretty. There's about 100 ships on average waiting in LA Long Beach, which represent about 40% of the import of goods in the United States. And there's so many ships that now actually we ask them to pollute a little bit our friends in the south border in Mexico, just to wait, because whenever they leave their port in Asia, they start getting in line with LA Long Beach and say, hey, you know, that's it, I left, I put myself on the line. That line is 100 days. Wow. And typically to go at a normal speed between Asia and LA Long Beach is 45 to 50 days.
Okay.
So even if you go slow, you're gonna get what, 70 days?
Right.
You still have 30 days.
Wow.
And you cannot go too slow, because then, you know, you're rocked like a duck on the So you have to be careful. So that's the first challenge we have. Then we have, which is interesting, the empty containers. So we're importing more than we're exporting. So as a result, there's piles of containers that keeps on adding up. And they're empty, they're there in the yard, and so when you try to move things around, well, you're bumping into something, so you go slower because, you know, you don't have all the space that you used to have. And so what we've done is we said, okay, well, you know, the empty containers, we need to keep them in the yard because we need to put them back on the ship whenever we can.
Right.
But there's also all these extra containers coming in, and we'll go into more details why we have extra containers. But now we're like, okay, we don't have the room in the yard anymore, so we need to put them somewhere else. Well, what we decided is that we were going to create makeshift yards, but then we don't have cranes anymore over there because it's just a parking lot, right?
Wow. Okay.
So we need what we call chassis. They are just basically the wheels that are going under the container.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, usually you put your container on top, you move somewhere, you take it away, and then you have your chassis back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you're using them for your parking lot.
Oh, wow.
So you don't have any more chassis. And guess what? You import them from China. So they are stuck
For 100 days.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Same
Wow.
with cranes, right? We're having a hard time getting the cranes out of
Well, the
Europe. We're having a hard
cranes-
time getting the cranes out of Asia as well.
The cranes are in the big, and LA Long Beach is huge.
Sure.
I don't remember, I think there's 16 different pods. But still, When you're not in that yard, then you don't have the cranes because it's just a glorified parking lot, basically.
Right.
So that creates another slowdown, right? Because now we have to move all those things. We looking for chassis all the time, so then we're not efficient. They're not readily available. It's just like, oh yeah, try to get that one over there, and so on. All confusion. Then to add to this, you have 80,000 open positions for drivers in the United States today.
Wow.
Truck drivers.
Truck drivers.
Yeah. Wow.
That's 30% more than pre-COVID.
Wow.
And to make the matter worse, a lot of 30% of the truck drivers are 55 or older, which means they're going to go retire very soon.
Right.
So the American Transportation Research Institute project that in 2023 we will have 100,000 positions for truck drivers.
Wow.
As of September 2021, the traffic of LA Long Beach was 25% more than a year before, which of course creates tension in the whole system, which receives 40% of the goods arriving from China to the United States. So where a ship unload, reload, so you unload, you reload, used to be 3 to 4 days, it's now 6 to 7 days. So we're slowing absolutely everything. So you start seeing what's happening is that you have a snowball that is just growing and growing and growing.
Right.
And so as a result, the port tarmac that usually was used 60 to 80% capacity is now at 90% capacity, which is almost
Yeah, they're maxed out.
maxed out.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's insane. So I think one thing that we've all become apparent of is that when tragedy strikes, right, something significant happens, whether it be a flood or any type of event, it's usually an that thing that recently happened down in Miami a few months ago when those condos crumbled into the water. They had multiple red flags. They had multiple conversations, yet they failed to execute, right? And then eventually they didn't address it, and then a tragedy happened. We've kind of seen an issue with supply chain that was probably, I would imagine there were red flags before.
Yes.
Right? Things that people had probably been raising for a long time, and then all of a sudden COVID happened, and
Absolutely.
then now we're experiencing the byproduct of that. Can we talk a little bit about kind of the core issues that we know it's happening now, but what are the core issues that kind of the root causes, right? What was?
Yeah. So really, the bursting of the whole thing was the fact that when COVID hit, a lot of companies thought, the whole economy is going to go down, so I'm going to slow down on my orders. Well, what happened is that you had all those people in the US that suddenly were stuck at home and working from home. And they decided, you know what, I want to make it a little bit more easy to be around because now it's where I spend all my days. So they started buying. And so suddenly you had actually an excess of demand when everything has been compressed, where the factories in China were going more slowly because they had COVID and they're spending more time to be able to manufacture things because of all the ways of making sure that the whole expansion of COVID was contained. So what happened is that when the companies in the US started seeing that glut happening, they started actually overcompensating and ordering extras, figuring, okay, if I bet 2 times on the table, then maybe I'll get 1 back. What happened then is that there's the glut that I mentioned earlier about the chassis, because now you're receiving more goods, you don't know where to put them, you put them aside. And then some other companies that didn't run fast enough to secure the shipment Now the goods are not here.
So I think one of the issues too is about the manufacturing piece, right? So for a long period of time, we've been on the opposite end of or from the export-import relationship. We've been more import-driven than we are export-driven when it comes to goods and services. And so I know there's a big piece of that having to do with this. And I think as we start to look into the trajectory in the future, are you seeing anything shift from owners and operators' perspective as to how to do manufacturing here?
Yes, I don't think we'll get back to what we were before, but let's try to explain a little bit how it works. We have built over the last decades a very elaborate flow of goods to maximize profits by sourcing in the cheapest places and reducing inventories with tight flows. So now we have a system that was expanded as much as possible, trying to squeeze everything. And of course, when it starts breaking, it's like juggling and with many balls in the air, and some falls on the floor, and you're trying to bring the one on the floor back up while keep on juggling. It's almost impossible.
Right.
So a lot of supply chain experts are saying what we're going to build again is not what we've seen before.
Gotcha.
And that has to do with the fact that we have the labor shortage is not going to be resolved right away. Production, transportation, distribution, as you said earlier, everyone has been touched. And everyone depends from each other. And now we are expanded across the globe, basically. So with the great resignation, we have less people going to work, and therefore work takes more time because you have less hands to take care of it.
Right.
Right.
Second, you still have social distancing. So it takes more time. I mean, that's a big problem in the ports, you know, I mean, social distancing and all of that, and, you know, paying attention to yourself, not getting infected, well, that slows down everything. And then you have the poor guys that have been infected that are staying at home or in the hospital and not working. So the whole labor force has been totally reduced. This impacts manufacturing, of course, but also the whole supply chain. That means that the ports themselves at origin sometimes are even closed by China that wants to make sure that the spread is contained. Then you have, of course, the people working at the docks. Then the ship crews. Ship crews is a huge issue. Some ports don't want them out because they have not been vaccinated. They stay in their things. They cannot go out to be vaccinated. It's a whole story. Then you typically offload. You don't always have a direct ship from origin to destination. It's exactly like when you're using an airplane and you have a layover. Well, you have the same for containers. So that is also slower because now you're moving things slower. You have the port drainage. So that's the moving the containers from the dock itself to those makeshift
Lay down yards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so warehousing is a huge issue. So for instance, we started saying, okay, we're going to open the port 24/7. Good idea. But then if the truck driver leaves the docks and the warehouse is closed, what do? So then we talked about drivers themselves, you know, lack of drivers. So long haul, short haul, all that is reduced. Sometimes we have clients asking us for a certain work, and we can't even find the truck for them.
So on that, it's kind of interesting. I was having dinner last night, and kind of a group setting type thing, and one of the guys there, he sells Freightliners and international trucks, right, the big rigs. They're with a company that he's based out of Chicago. And he said right now it's been really interesting because they kind of get to pick and choose the winners and losers
Absolutely.
of who gets trucks based off of when they get delivery. So, they're bringing them to their best clients. They're bringing them to the ones that have the money in hand right now that are ready to go. And the people that are financing, they're not getting their fleets that they need.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of
Actually,
interesting.
that's really where we have kind of an edge in Nexterus.
Yeah.
Because we've been around for 75 years. Our relationship with clients is typically an engagement of 16 years. So we retain the clients 16 years. And it's the same with the truck companies.
Right.
We make sure that the truck companies have their life as easy as possible, sometimes even helping to get the truck drivers back on weekends at home and things like this. So you're absolutely right, that engagement between the trucking companies, us, and the clients make that yes, you're favored because now you have a good relationship,
Right.
and you're there. But that's extremely important, and that's why when someone just pops in and asks for one spot quote, it's sometimes extremely difficult because, you typically want to reserve your service for the long run clients.
Right.
Yep. And which is normal for business. I mean, it makes sense. Your
makes total
consistent
sense.
clients, the people who deliver on a consistent basis, that's who you're going to reserve those spots for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's across all industries. It's just we're seeing it magnified now because there is no space, there is no margin. So
That's it. Everything has been, as you mentioned, exacerbated because of the thing. I think the juggling is a good example of how you suddenly have ball on the floor. What the hell do you do?
Right.
So we're all anxious to, I guess, get an idea as to when normal might be on the horizon, right? I think we've all been waiting for normal for like one day we think we're about to be back to normal, and then it's like, oh no, we're going not anywhere close to normal. So what does it look like for us in supply chain over the next few years? When can we start to see maybe some alleviation here? And then also, do you think that'll translate to like one of the conversations? This is a two-part question, right? The first question is when will we see normal? The second part is the cost to that normal, not just how do we get there, but then will we start to see that bleed back down into the supply chain and the cost of goods inside of our things? Because right now we know that the cost of all this freight and everything has gone up exponentially. That translates to the producer. The producer has to mark up the cost to get to the consumer, hence inflation. So, do these guys ever back down? I mean, once you get up to a price this high, is it like, do you have to come down when supply and demand starts to level out?
So, excellent points. Yes, indeed. Some costs have already gone down. So we start seeing that there's caution, but there's no one has a crystal ball. Actually, it's interesting. As we speak, I have put a survey on LinkedIn asking people what they think is going to be the end of the crunch we have, and 62% of them said mid next year. So I think by the end of this year, we'll start getting things a little bit more in order. But it's only at the end of next year that actually we will have gone into a new type of operation. And let me explain you a little bit. I think that we need to incorporate new risk factors and in our financial analysis. How do we want to equilibrate the flow of goods? I mean, we've seen that having those very long threads, very thin, is very dangerous.
Right.
And so we need to evaluate the cost of agility. So that's something that is new. Now we realize, we need to be more agile. And just two numbers, I love numbers, you've seen that. So 1/3 of a work factory is actually coming from China, from the world. So 1/3 of the world manufacture actually is made in China. US manufactures only 12% of all the computer chips that are produced in the world.
Currently.
How come?
Currently. There's
Currently-
some new
So,
facilities coming
yes,
online.
actually, so that's my point.
Yeah.
We are starting to build what I would call regional magnets. So we're starting to think more regionally, not only nationally, but regionally. So, for instance, for us in the US, let's enhance all the NAFTA
Yeah.
organization. It's close by. There's less challenges of being at sea and all of that. And so, for the chips, Intel just announced that they're going to spend $20 billion. That's a chunk of money, yeah, for 2 factories in Ohio. But it will only see the production end of 25 if we're lucky.
Well, I mean, Texas, same thing. I mean, Samsung announced their new chip plant also, right? I think it's
Yeah.
an $8 billion facility right outside of Austin.
Yeah.
So that one's coming online. I think they said they might have that one up as early as 2024. But, I mean, yeah, you're still looking at 2-3 years before they're up to pace with the production that they can crank out. I mean, it'll help, but how much help is it going to be by that point, right?
Exactly. I mean, no, I think we know we need more chips over time. So
Sure.
there's, I'm sure those guys have done their equation pretty well.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is that those chips shortage actually demonstrates how supply chain intricacies are playing, because we cannot produce enough cars today because we don't have enough chips. Actually, and one interesting fact is that the only car maker that has not been affected by chips, surprisingly, is Tesla. And why? Because they create their own software. So if they change the chip, because they adapt to another chip, they can tweak the software.
The other thing that they did, they actually went to a chip manufacturer and they paid for 3 years up front.
Yes.
So they basically bought out the complete manufacturing process for a couple of different chip plants. But yeah, they bought a 3-year supply and paid for it in cash up front. So they're getting their chips, and if someone else approaches those manufacturers, they're just telling them, no, no,
So-
we've already been paid. This is done.
But I've seen few articles that are really showing that even the traditional car makers are actually now switching to a software model. So the software as a service, well, now you're going to have options from your car that you can download. So basically, today I want more horsepower. Boom! I download that app,
That's cool.
and suddenly I want, I don't know, some kind of features that I didn't want to pay up front because I didn't want to spend the money up front, but now I can afford it. Boom! You add it.
Do they have an app that will tell my wife how to quit telling me how to drive? Slow down. Watch out, use your blinker. I need one of those
Right.
Beep.
I think the solution is really to think differently and identify the choke points in order to assess risk and opportunities. We need to move from a just-in-time mentality to a just-in-case attitude. So that's very a shift of mind, and that's what I offer to the supply chain industry at all, is really rethinking how we work. And that's why I was saying that by the end of next year, we will have a different way of, and we've seen it with those chip manufacturers coming here and so
Sure.
on. We will try to start equilibrating. We need to move from a reactive mode to being able to anticipate. And anticipation means being proactive, responsive, and resilient. Reduce the risk and rely on diversification, finding alternatives to avoid single sourcing. And the single sourcing is not only a single company, but also regionally, making sure that we can balance and avoid the big issues of supply chain.
Right. So your company might have some big news coming up, right? Because you were talking about some stuff earlier with NAFTA. Can you want to get into that a little bit?
Sure. It's going to be a drop in the bucket, but there are truck drivers available at our neighbors, at Canada and Mexico. Today we don't have the right visas to have them come temporarily in the US to help us. We estimate there's like maybe 5,000-6,000 drivers that would be available, It's very small compared to the 80,000, but especially for smaller truck companies, it could help tremendously. So we're talking to the administration and government to try to see if we can expand this the type of visa that exists today for NAFTA to truck drivers, so that it's a little help. It's not everything, but I think it goes also into this whole regional thing. They are our neighbors. Maybe we can help each other a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think we're starting to see more of that as people start getting creative to think outside the box, which, again, anytime this happens, we're going to see huge advancements in the future as we kind of on a go-forward basis. We got time for one more question, I think, as we get ready to wrap up. Would love to hear your kind of thoughts. I mean, you were sharing with us beforehand some of your prior experiences that kind of positioned you for this role, which I thought was pretty interesting. But can you talk to us about some of your contributing factors that have helped you become successful or get to where you're at?
My background is in management information system, and I've been working on very large projects such as the intranet of the Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002, and some billion-dollar project in Kuwait in the oil and gas sector. So whenever you're touching those big projects, there's really a mechanism, and it's a supply chain on its own.
Sure.
It may be more of people rather than goods, even though the project in Kuwait were clearly also with a lot of hard metal. So you touch and you see the challenges of supply chain, and I guess it's a question of thinking strategically and positioning things so that we can solve issues.
Well, it sounds like they picked the right guy for the job.
I hope so.
And you've just been a joy to have on the show today. It sounds like you're really on top of what it is that you're doing, but also looking for solutions and bringing value add to the marketplace, which
Absolutely.
is, we need more people rowing like you. So we're very excited to have that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Sure. So you can, I've seen your post on LinkedIn. I've been following you. You got some great content. I would encourage our audience to do the same, and then stay connected to Philippe, because he really does have some information that he's pushing out via LinkedIn that I think is just great content. And usually from that I personally take an interest in this stuff because it affects my business, but you can try to trail back from him, and the connections that you see that are engaging with you on a pretty regular basis are also keeping us pretty informed. So it seems like your broad network is really kind of paying off, so it's good to have that. So if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, you can stay connected to us anytime. Make sure you reach out to us with any guests or potential people that you think would be great to have on the show. And you can always follow us at the allianceportregion.com. It's the Economic Alliance Houston Port Regions page. You can subscribe to any of our channels from there.
And sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please pass this on to somebody who needs to hear it and continue to spread the good news. Remember, our mission is to make sure that we advocate for our region. We keep people educated and informed of the great things that are happening here, not only in the port region, but across the great state of Texas. And we're going to keep you informed of that, and that's our mission. So thank you very much. I'm your host, Jason Lee, again with Clint Aiken and Philippe Flichy. Flichy. There we go. Boom. Took us like a little while to get that right, but we are so glad to have him today, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.